Hello, I'm Divya A, Assistant Professor ECE, AJ Institute of Engineering and Technology, Mangalore. So in today's video lecture, we will be learning about WDM concepts and components, which is the module 4 of Fiber Optics and Networks 15 EC 82. So in this video lecture, we will be covering Introduction to WDM, Operational Principles of WDM, WDM Standards, Mach-Zehnder Interferometer Multiplexers. So what is WDM? WDM stands for Wavelength Division Multiplexing. It is the most important and most popular method to increase the capacity of a single-stranded fiber. So, as we have all learnt from our elementary school science, a white light beam can be separated into individual colored light beams by a prism, as shown in this picture. So similarly, individual colored light beams can also be combined into a single white light beam by the prism, that is, if we use the prism in the reverse direction. So here WDM uses this same idea. So traditionally only one colored light was used on a single strand of fiber to carry the information such as 1550 nanometer light. However, starting from the early 1990s, the internet boom pushed service providers to find a method to increase the capacity on their network in the most economical way. So that is when WDM devices were invented. So as shown in the right side picture, in a WDM system, many different colored lights are combined by a WDM multiplexing device and put into a single strand of fiber, and each color here is called a channel. And on the receiving side, each color is separated into its own channel by a WDM demultiplexing device. So it shows that a single fiber capacity is increased by 40 times with the 40 channel WDM. So the beauty of WDM is that you only need to upgrade the end equipment. So we need not dig up trenches to bury more fibers, which is much more costlier. So the definition of WDM or wavelength division multiplexing is: it is the technology of combining a number of independent information carrying wavelengths onto the same fiber. Next, let's see the operational principles of WDM. So the implementation of these WDM networks, it requires a variety of passive and active devices to combine, distribute, isolate and amplify optical power at different wavelengths. So passive devices require no external control for their operation. These components are mainly used to split and combine or tap off optical signals. The wavelength dependent performance of active devices can be controlled electronically or optically, thereby providing a large degree of network flexibility. So active WDM components include tunable optical filters, tunable sources and optical amplifiers. So here this figure, it shows the implementation of passive and active components in a typical WDM link containing various types of optical amplifier. So at the transmitting end, there are several independently modulated light sources, each emitting signals at a unique wavelength. So here a multiplexer is needed to combine these optical outputs into a continuous spectrum of signals and couple them onto a single fiber. So at the receiving end, a demultiplexer is required to separate the optical signals into appropriate detection channels for signal processing. So this figure shows operating regions ranging from the O band to the L band, in which narrow line width optical sources can be used simultaneously. So these operating regions, so here we have this O band and here we have C band. So these operating regions can be viewed either in terms of spectral width. So spectral width means the wavelength band occupied by the light signal, or these operating regions can be viewed by means of optical bandwidth. So optical bandwidth here refers to the frequency band occupied by the light signal. So that is what is meant by spectral width and optical bandwidth. So to find the optical bandwidth corresponding to a particular spectral width, so that is the relationship between the optical bandwidth and spectral width, in these active regions we use the fundamental relationship C is equal to mu lambda. So where as you all know, speed is c is the speed of light. So differentiating this yields for uh, delta lambda, which refers to wavelength deviation, which is much less than lambda square, will yield after differentiation delta nu is equal to c by lambda square mod of delta lambda, where delta nu is the deviation in frequency which corresponds to the wavelength deviation given by delta lambda around this wavelength, around lambda. So the WDM standards developed by the International Telecommunication Union specify channel spacing in terms of frequency. So a key reason for selecting a fixed frequency spacing rather than a constant wavelength spacing is that when locking a laser to a particular operating mode, it is the frequency of the laser that is fixed. So that is the reason for selecting fixed frequency spacing. So the recommendation G.692 was the first ITU-T specification for WDM. In 2002, the ITU-T released recommendation G.694.1, which is aimed specifically at DWDM. So DWDM stands for dense WDM, which generally refers to small wavelength separations. So this document, it specifies WDM operation in the S, C and L bands for high quality, high rate metro area network and wide area network services. This implementation requires the use of stable, high quality, temperature controlled and wavelength controlled laser diode light sources. So here the table 10.1 lists the part of the ITU-T G.694.1 dense WDM frequency grid for 100 and 50 GHz spacing in the L and C bands. So the columns that is labeled 50 GHz offset means that for the 50 GHz grid, one uses the 100 GHz spacing with these 50 GHz values interleaved. For example, the 50 GHz channels in the L band would be 186.00 terahertz, 186.05 terahertz, 186.10 terahertz and so on. Note that when the frequency spacing is uniform, the wavelengths are not spaced uniformly because of the relationship which we learned just now, that is delta nu is equal to c by lambda square mod of delta lambda. So that is why when the frequency spacing is uniform, the wavelengths are not spaced uniformly because it is the frequency spacing is inversely proportional to the wavelength. So the ITU-T uses a channel numbering convention. For example, here the frequency 186.40 terahertz is represents ITU channel 64. Same way here, or if I check here 186.75, it represents ITU channel 675. So in 2002, the ITU-T released recommendation G.694.2, which defines the spectral grid for coarse CWDM. So as shown in this figure here, the CWDM grid is made of 18 wavelengths which is defined within the range, that is the range is from 1270 nanometer to around 1610 nanometer, that is O through L bands, spaced by 20 nanometer with wavelength drift tolerances of plus or minus 2 nanometer. This can be achieved with inexpensive light sources that are not temperature controlled. So the ITU-T recommendation G.695 released in 2004 outlines optical interface specification for multiple channel CWDM over a distance of 40 and 80 km. So both unidirectional and bidirectional systems are included in the recommendations. The applications for G.694 cover all or part of the 1270 to 1610 nanometer range. So the main deployments are for single mode fibers such as those specified in ITU-T recommendations G.652 and G.655. So that was about WDM standards. So next we'll learn about multiplexer, that is the Mach-Zehnder interferometer multiplexers. So the wavelength dependent multiplexers can also be made using Mach-Zehnder interferometry techniques. So these devices, they can be either active or passive devices. So here figure 10.15, it shows the individual Mach-Zehnder interferometer or MZI. So here this figure shows a 2x2 Mach-Zehnder interferometer, that is 2 inputs, 2 output. which you can notice here. So this 2 into 2 MZI, it consists of 3 stages. So and here the first stage, so this is a initial stage which is a 3 dB directional coupler. So the first stage is a 3 dB directional coupler. So here this acts like a splitter which splits the input signal. So the first stage is a directional coupler, 3 dB directional coupler that splits the input signals. Then the second stage, in the second stage, which is the central section, so here we have waveguides, that is one waveguide is longer than the other by a factor delta L. So this is done in order to give a wavelength dependent phase shift between the two arms. So the central section, it acts like a phase shifter. Here we have the waveguides in which one waveguide has a length greater than the other waveguide by a factor delta L, and this is used to give a to provide a phase shift. Then the last section is a 3 dB coupler which recombines the signals at the output. So that is why it is called the combiner. So the function of this arrangement is that by splitting the input beam and introducing a phase shift in one of the paths, the recombined signals will interfere constructively at one output and destructively at the other. So the signals then finally emerge from only one output port. So next, continuing with Mach Zehnder interferometer. So here the propagation matrix, that is the S matrix of a M coupler for a coupler length of D is given by this matrix. So this is the propagation matrix of the coupler of length D. So here K is the coupling coefficient. So since we are considering 3 dB couplers that divide the power equally, then we can write 2 KD, where K stands for coupling coefficient, D is the length of the coupler, equal to pi by 2, so that this matrix reduces to this matrix over here, that is 1 by root 2 1 J1. So in the central region, the outputs from the two arms come from the same light source, isn't it? In the central region, when the signals in the two arms come from the same light source, the output from these two guides will have a phase difference of delta phi. Why it will have a phase difference? Because the length of one waveguide is longer than the other waveguide by a factor delta L. So we can write the equation of this phase difference delta phi as 2 pi n1 L by lambda minus 2 pi n2 L plus delta L divided by lambda. So here n1 and n2, it represents the refractive index. So this phase difference, it can either arise from a different path length or through a refractive refractive index difference. So what we take here is that we take that both arms to have the same index, that is n1 is equal to n2 is equal to, we write it as effective index. So we take that n1 is equal to n2 is equal to n effective. So then we can write the equation of phase difference as k into delta L. So where k is nothing but 2 pi n effective divided by lambda. So for a given phase difference, that is delta phi, the propagation matrix, that is m delta phi for the phase shifter. So earlier we wrote the propagation matrix for the coupler. Now after we got the equation of phase difference, we are writing the propagation matrix for the phase shifter. So it is given by this matrix here. So now the optical output fields, that is represented by E out 1 and E out 2 from the two central arms, can be related to the input fields, which is represented here by E in 1 and E in 2 by this relationship given by 10.34. So where this value of m is nothing but the propagation matrix for the coupler into the propagation matrix of phase shifter into again propagation matrix of the coupler. If you remember, we had used 3 stages, right? For Mach Zehnder interferometer multiplexer, there was 3 stages, and this is the propagation matrix of the 3 stages. And then after substituting, we get this matrix. So now, since we want to build a multiplexer, we need to have the inputs to the MZ die at different wavelengths. That is, at input 1 the wavelength is lambda 1, at input 2 the wavelength is lambda 2. So then from equation 10.34, the output fields, that is represented by E out 1 and E out 2. So they will be the sum of the individual contributions from the 2 input fields. So the output powers, so finally we'll be calculating the output powers, are found from the light intensity, which is the square of the field strength. So we got the output field strength. So the output power at output 1 will be the square of the field strength of output 1. So after simplifying we get this equation 10.38. Similarly, the power at output 2 we get this equation 10.39. So where input power, that is we have substituted here the input power, we get by the square of the input field strength. So in deriving equation 10.38 and 10.39, you can notice that we have dropped the cross terms, right? Why? Because their frequency, which is twice the optical carrier frequency, is beyond the response capability of the photo detector. Okay, because the frequency becomes more than the response capability of the photo detector. So from equation 10.38 and 10.39, we see that if we want all the power from both inputs to leave the same output port, we need to have K1 delta L by 2 is equal to pi and K2 delta L by 2 is equal to pi by 2, or K1 minus K2 into delta L is equal to 2 pi n effective into 1 by lambda 1 minus 1 by lambda 2 delta L is equal to pi. So hence the length difference in the interferometer arms should be delta L is equal to 2 n effective into 1 by lambda 1 minus 1 by lambda 2, its inverse, which is equal to C divided by 2 n effective delta nu, where delta nu is the frequency separation of the two wavelengths. So here there is an example. Assume that the input wavelengths of a 2 into 2 silicon MZI are separated by 10 gigahertz, that is delta lambda is equal to 0.08 nanometer at 1550 nanometer, that is the wavelength deviation. So with the n effective is equal to index is equal to refractive index to 1.5 in a silicon waveguide, we have that. So from equation 10.41, the waveguide length difference must be, substituting in the equation for delta L, that is we wrote it just now, C divided by 2 n effective delta nu. So after substituting in the equation, we get the answer as 10 millimeter. So if the frequency separation is 130 gigahertz, then we will get the waveguide length difference as 0.77 millimeter. So just now we saw a 2 into 2 MZI. So using basic 2 into 2 MZI, any size n into n multiplexer can be constructed. So here the figure 10.15, so this is the figure 10.15, which gives an example for a 4 into 4 MZI. 4 into 4 MZI multiplexer. Here the inputs to the MZI, okay, so this is one MZI and this is the second MZI. So the inputs to the first MZI is V and V plus 2 delta V, so which we will call as lambda 1 and lambda 3 respectively, and the inputs to MZI2 are V plus delta V plus V plus 3 delta V, which we will call as lambda 2 and lambda 4 respectively. So the signals in both the interferometers of the first stage, you can see they are separated by 2 delta V. The path differences satisfy the condition. The path differences satisfy the condition, that is delta L1 is equal to delta L2 is equal to C divided by 2 N effective into 2 delta nu. So in the next stage, the inputs, this is the next stage. In the next stage, the inputs are separated by delta nu. So consequently, to have delta L3, so consequently we need to have this delta L3 is equal to C divided by 2 N effective delta nu, that is equal to 2 delta L1. So when these conditions are satisfied, all 4 input powers will emerge from port C. So all will emerge from port C. That is when delta L3 is equal to twice 2 delta L1. So that was for a 4 into 4 MZI multiplexer. Now for an N to 1 MZI multiplexer, where N is equal to 2 raised to N, with N greater than or equal to 1, the number of multiplexer stages is N and the number of MZIs in stage J is 2 to the power N minus J. So the path difference in an interferometer element of stage J is C divided by 2 raised to N minus J N effective delta nu. The N to 1 MZI multiplexer can be used as a 1 to N demultiplexer by reversing the light propagation direction. Thank you.